Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this wonderful space. My name is Kansiime Taremwa. I'll be hosting this space with Gen Mugisha Muntu, where we have an opportunity to ask a few questions and get some answers. Again, General Muntu is no stranger to the Ugandan audience. He's a former Bush War hero, or a Bush War hero in the 1986 revolution that brought the NRM to power. He's also former president of the Forum for Democratic Change and also the former presidential candidate for the Alliance for National Transformation. This evening, we join General Muntu again to have some questions and answers to some of the issues that have been going around. General, since our last engagement, so much has happened in the country and beyond. So it's my pleasure to host you again. And if you may please greet the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you, Kansiime, for hosting me again. I'd also like to thank all the people, the colleagues who have decided whatever you would have been doing to participate in this conversation. It's my pleasure to be in this space again. Indeed, a lot has happened, and a lot, I believe, will still happen. But that's the nature of life. We have to continue struggling. As they say, a struggle is a continuous process. We have to keep doing whatever we need to do until we are a free people, until we're able to enjoy our lives in a country where there is equality before the law, where there are equal opportunities, where there is justice and fairness. It's part and parcel of a struggle, whatever we are going through right now. Yes, Taremwa.
Thank you, General, for that introduction. And indeed, we will dive through it. Just to tell our viewers and listeners that we are live on our Twitter handle for the Alliance for National Transformation, my own Twitter handle at KM Taremwa22, or X handle as they call it now, and also Gen Mugisha Muntu's handle. We are also live on Zoom, and our technical team will shortly share the Zoom link on the X platform. Be that as it may, General, we will jump right into it. There's been a lot going on, especially in the corridors of Parliament. Some of my own colleagues have been involved in the fight to expose some of the dirty work that's going on or allegations that are happening within the corridors of Parliament, some that directly affect or implicate the highest office in the Parliament, the Speaker of Parliament. What are your thoughts on the allegations of corruption? What are we getting wrong? How should we go about it?
We do salute the civil society actors and the citizens who are engaged at the front of fighting corruption, wherever it exists, more so the focus on government institutions. As is always said, one struggle, many fronts. So we really salute those who struggle on the different fronts, as long as we are all focused on eventually achieving what we all desire to achieve as citizens. We are proud citizens living in a country where we all know that national resources are utilized to our benefit rather than to individual benefit. And we've been seeing the fight going on at the level of Parliament. But the exposure itself really shows us the depth of the crisis in this country. Parliament is normally supposed to be occupied, representatives who go to Parliament for people. Ordinarily are supposed to be the cream of society. They are supposed to reflect what the society is about. So in a situation like ours, where I find that Parliament is so immersed in corruption to the extent that it is, it boggles the mind. even to try to decipher whether actually the people in the parliament are a reflection of who we are as a people. And if they are not a reflection of who we are as a people, then we need to find out what exactly happened if we have got many honest men and women in this country, and yet those who are in parliament, which is supposed to be, and indeed in normal countries, it is normally supposed to be the highest organ that holds the other arms of government accountable. But when you find that it is at the forefront of corruption itself, it's a big dilemma. I, in my honest estimation, I don't think that the members of parliament reflect who we are as a people. I know for sure that there are many Ugandans who are much better than the rot that we see in parliament, who would normally operate above that, wherever else they operate from. And therefore, that's why we need to seriously think and see, okay, these people they are not a representation of who we are. Majority of many Ugandans would want to see transparency in the management of national resources. So if there is that situation which doesn't reflect who we are, we must work day and night to ensure that we neutralize that cancer that there is of corruption, wherever it exists in all public offices. And therefore, we work again day and night to ensure that people, men and women who are honest, who care about the country, who care about others, are the ones who come up in those positions of responsibility. Because at the same time, we need to make judgments. As we judge those who are in parliament because of how corrupt they are, we must also judge ourselves. Because how on earth can such people be in parliament when there are many Ugandans who really would be much, much, much better? And therefore, it shows that those men and women who are honest have tended to take a back seat and let those who really don't care about the country, who care only about themselves, to be the ones to occupy those positions of responsibility. It's an anomaly, and we must fight it until we eliminate it.
Thank you, General. And indeed, that raises an important question. I know that it is not your style to discuss individuals, but I will have to bring up some names in the discussion. I know that in the timeline since I think the fellows from Agora started to exhibit some of the things going on in parliament, some of the people who I think have been linked to you in the past, like the Honorable Semujunganda, were put on the spot for some of the things that have to do with not, reprimanding the speaker or not saying anything. Some people have been too afraid to speak against the speaker. And, Honorable Semuju, for example, is one of the MPs who Ugandans have had trust in for some time. What is it that is in parliament that keeps people, or that gets people afraid to speak about not just the corruption, but also the person of the Speaker of Parliament? What is it that is scaring even, well-intentioned Ugandans like Honorable Semju?
It's a human tendency when individuals find themselves isolated. If you are, for example, you are in about 1,000 people, and you are very, very few, just a handful of people who are going in a different direction from where the 1,000 are going. It's a very, very taxing experience. And therefore, when you don't have support networks to keep supporting you and keep building the numbers where you are, so that eventually you shift the balance of forces in favor of those who want to go in the direction that you would want to go, those of you who are few. Eventually, people start breaking down. It happens. It's part of human nature. And therefore, it is our responsibility, again, those of us who are not in parliament, keep working with the few who are in parliament, to help them to build resilience. Because it's a question of adding numbers. It's a struggle. Every time there's going to be a shift, since creation, whenever there's going to be a shift, it all depends on the balance of forces. The balance of forces are in favor of those who are involved in dark activities. And there are those who want to bring light to bear on the dark activities. Those who are still few, but who can emit light, must keep building, galvanizing those who can emit light until there are many more, and therefore they can influence that situation and therefore cause a shift in the balance of forces in their favor from the side of darkness. It happens all over the world. It happens in many countries. It's happening here and also in a number of other countries. Our responsibility is where we are at. And therefore, those of us who are outside must keep coordinating, but also give backup those who are still in parliament, not to despair, not to give up, to know that eventually right is might. You know, people who build resilience and are fighting for justice, are fighting for freedoms and rights of people, are fighting for transparency in the management of national resources, eventually win. Always, it's part of life. And therefore, we have to keep encouraging them. Even those who have slid and, and maybe, those who slide and fall for a while, we must keep holding them by the arms and, making them stand up again and know that the struggle is still on. It's like in war. The people get wounded in war. You lift them from the field, take them in the rear, they go in the hospitals. Once they are treated and they recover, they go back on the battlefront. The problem is those who are irrecoverable, those who die. Those who die, you bury them. Like in the politics of Uganda, those who are beyond recovery, they will die. A political death, not physical death. They'll completely disappear. But those who are recoverable, they need to be given backup. So we keep building the numbers. And also keep encouraging the fresh ones who are not in politics to join the ranks of those who want to fight and move the country in the correct direction. It's a struggle. It's a war. Most people don't understand that this is a battle, and it's a very subtle one. That's why many people collapse, because on the battlefield you see where the enemy is. You do reconnaissance, and because it's physical, you can see the enemy entrenchments. You can see where the gun emplacements of the enemy are. But in this kind of, and then you can organize your own fire and direct it towards where the enemy entrenchments are. But in this kind of struggle, there are things which you can't touch. It's psychological, and there are a number of people when they become desperate or feel that this is an insurmountable, these are insurmountable impediments, when they look at the numbers of the men who are involved in the corruption. So those who understand the dynamics of these kinds of struggle must keep reaching out to each other, giving each other support, giving each other encouragement, and building numbers. And incidentally, people who have integrity, people who have built resilience, most times it's not one-on-one. If you can have one and you can overwhelm the 10, well, they say the guilty are afraid. Many people who are corrupt are quite afraid. So you don't have to match them even in numbers. If you have got 100 corrupt people and you have 30 strong men and women of integrity, they can disperse the 100 or plus, 100 plus. Always.
Thank you, General. And indeed, you raised good points on the numbers. I just want to ask another question related. I know that right before you moved from the Forum for Democratic Change, and also, just when the ANT had begun as the new formation initially, you had some people in Parliament now who were close to your, so to say, your establishment. People like the Honorable Anna Deke, people like the Honorable Paul Miru and a couple of others that seem to have chosen political expediency over building building the ANT as you had together with a few of your comrades, as you had indicated or envisaged it. Are you reaching out to these people, because these are some of the voices that have a place in Parliament and could be extremely crucial in moving the value-based system of the ANT as you present it? Are you reaching out to these people, and what are some of their reflections on what could happen, especially in the next electoral cycle?
We are comfortable with the colleagues who shift, for example, from Alliance for National Transformation and go to other sister opposition parties. I mean, someone like Honorable Paul Mwiru, he moved from NT, but he went to NU. So we are comfortable with that. We have no problem with that, because different fronts, one struggle. The only people whom we become really worried about are those who would abandon any party within the opposition and join the government side. Because the best kind of that is, it's like surrender, more or less. And we are not worried because we think that we will be becoming weak, worried for them. Because most times when you're on a struggle, you would want to see that you reach the line of victory with all colleagues that you've been fighting alongside with. So my main worry is for them. The one thing is to be involved in a struggle for a long time, then you abandon it, and then shortly decide where you were, takes power, and then you find yourself eventually again, out there. I remember, like when we were fighting in '85, there are some people who abandoned. There were not many. There were maybe about 5. Some of them had been even at the university in Makerere, and they are part of the group which was called Intellectuals. And they got tired, so they ran out of the bush and came to Kampala in '85. '86, we found them here in Kampala. You can imagine. We became victorious. And it happens in life. So we are personally, I'm comfortable with those who leave NT and join the opposition parties. My biggest, what I am not able to decipher most times are those who, when you fight against a regime, there are many who have fought for a long time, and then eventually you go along with the regime. I normally give them the benefit of doubt because from their own analysis, maybe they think that's the best way of achieving whatever they've been fighting for. Most times you leave all that to time. Time eventually shows whatever motivations make us do whatever we do in life. So we keep doing what we have to do. Others will have to do whatever they do. And then it's time which will sort us out eventually, all of us.
Thank you, General. And indeed, you are famous for your quote on time as being the judge of all. And one would even argue that over the years you've been vindicated. But 2 questions, and very frankly, General, do you think you actually will have an opportunity to lead this country once? Number 2, if you think that, how much more time should Ugandans who believe in your message give you? Because I think it's now been well over 6-7 years since the ANT broke away from the FDC. But do we see progress? Is there progress in building the ANT structures as you have been, known to take as your message?
What I'm sure about is that a party which takes the message that we do have as Alliance for National Transformation and has resilience and has got leaders, a team of leaders who are resilient, who are focused, who are disciplined, that party will take power in this country. I am as sure of that as I'm sure that day follows night. So I have no doubt about that in my mind. Right track, we have no... We don't operate according to, we set timelines, yes, but if we get to a timeline and we have not achieved what we would have set ourselves to achieve, we are not destabilized. Because what drives us is the end state. The end state being that there is a state that would want to see our country become or be. We want to see a country where there's fairness, where there are equal opportunities, where there's transparency in the management of national resources, where there is equality before the law, where there is justice. That's the end state. So nothing else will divert us from achieving that. And time is a factor, yes, but it cannot determine or derail us from continuing to be focused on achieving that end state. And I think that's why there is a bit of a problem for many people who give up. Because there are people who focus more on time than on the focus they put on the objectives. Before you achieve the objectives you set yourself, don't allow yourself to be destabilized by time. Keep fighting. Even if you pass on from this life in a physical sense, but you pass on when you are focused on those objectives, and you've also built those who take over. They'll keep fighting, even if another generation passes on and another comes in, until they achieve those objectives. Don't allow yourself to be destabilized, because your focus is on achieving those objectives. Now, people who focus only on time, when they wait, maybe if they have set themselves only 5 years and they don't achieve that, another 5 years, they don't achieve that, at times they get destabilized in their minds psychologically, and they think that, okay, maybe they chose to move on a wrong direction, and therefore they collapse. They become frustrated, they lose hope, and they give up. We don't do that. We keep focused on the objectives, which I've already indicated. And it doesn't matter, even if we don't get into power, those of us as individuals, but that we build a firm foundation on the basis of which others can take power and create or put in place that which we make sacrifices for. So be it. That's what life is all about. Life is not about on our physical existence. There are things that we don't touch, to me, which are more critical. You know, you can't touch justice, you can't touch fairness, you can't touch the spirit of a person, for example. But it's our spirit which makes us move and go through all nature of challenges, through harrowing experiences. You can see people who climb like Mount Everest. You can see people who engage through rigorous training to get gold medals. You can see people who can fight wars and there are bombs flying all over the place, hitting as close as 10 meters away. Someone is in a trench. But when they're meant to advance, they advance. People die on the side, left, right, but they keep moving until they achieve victory. Now, what moves them is nothing physical. It's a spirit in that person. And that means he's motivated by something larger than himself or herself. So a society that does not have such people is a dead society. So those who fight until victory, or when they pass on, they leave that in those who follow them. That country will reach a point of breakthrough, and it will build itself to the level that even those who would have died would have been focused on, even if they don't see it in a physical sense. But those who are driven more by the flesh, maybe you want pomp and glory, maybe you want some good things, you want to still sleep in a nice house, maybe a nice vehicle, which are good. If you put them in balance and you think that those are more important than the things you don't touch, then you'll collapse along the way. You'll not reach that objective.
Thank you, General. I'm forced to ask you another question in that sense, because you do raise the issue of moving beyond the person of General Muntu and the other stalwarts in the party, like the Honorable Alice Alaso and Ambassador Edith Sempara, and a couple of others who, as we can see for sure, are in the evening of their political careers, if I may. Can you say confidently, General Muntu, that they are younger people, younger men and women, who have bought into your message, who have bought into your vision, who have bought into the ANT's value system and are willing to take the party, or are most young people going to go for the expedient route, the one which looks more likely, even if it's in the opposition, but it looks more likely to have, power? What is your message to young people, one, who may not have bought into your message, but also critically, are there young people within the party that can take ANT forward if you were to move from the main leadership positions?
Yeah, that's what motivates us. If they want new people, if they want younger people coming on board, whom we know are also driven by the desire to see this country go in the places where we want it to go, that I've already talked about, a value-driven society, values-driven society where there are leaders who care more about the country than themselves. If we didn't have a sense that there are more and more who are coming on board, we would be people who would be frustrated. But we are not frustrated. That's why we go when we're operating at the levels at which we operate, mostly at the sub-county level. We meet many people, young, middle-aged, old, who really share in the message of Alliance for National Transformation. That's what motivates us. That's what enables us to make all the necessary sacrifices that we keep making. And also the encouraging factor is that we know for sure that people who change societies, people who change countries are never in millions. They are never in hundreds of thousands. They are never even in thousands. They are a couple of men and women who would be bold, who are resilient, who are focused, who are relentless in pursuing what they want to see achieved. Normally, I keep telling people, most of our parties in the opposition, when you look at the top leadership, you'll be talking about those who, for example, go on delegates conferences, 1,500 roughly, 1,200, 1,000, thereabouts. So if a party is able to build a team of leaders at the different levels, at the parish, at the sub-county, at the district, and at the national level, and the combined numbers of those, you get about 1,000 men and women of integrity. That party will transform this country in a manner and form that most people are not yet even able to comprehend. And that's why we're not frustrated, because we are not looking for hundreds of thousands of people. The hundreds and thousands, the millions of people you need are those who give you the support. But the pillars, the focal point, the ones who are the spearhead of a struggle, ours is not that many. And therefore, we keep seeing a number who come up who are getting more and more resilient. It encourages us. And that's why we keep on disseminating this message. And also for those who seem to give up and say, oh, this is a situation which is impossible, because they think in numbers. No, we are building a vehicle. That's why our method is at times not well understood, because they would be expecting us to go try to mobilize masses of people in hundreds of thousands. Yes, it is important, and at some point we'll go in that direction. Right now, we need a vehicle, the pillars, because the moment you get into power, that's the beginning of the challenge. How do you transform a country if you have not built together a team of men and women who are resilient, who are focused, who are disciplined, and who will work in tandem to move the country from the mess in which it is and put it on the right track? So those are not so many. We need the Ugandans to understand that. Those don't have to be hundreds of thousands. They don't even have to be tens of thousands. Just a few hundreds, and they transform a country.
General Muntu, are you not being naive to the realities of Ugandan politics? And I know you receive, I see these accusations a lot on social media, and they come to your space as well. Are you not just being naive about the Ugandan political class and the Ugandan political fortunes, to the extent that, when you make statements like this is just for those who think about the numbers? So should we ignore the numbers and focus on the qualitative approach to our politics, or should we find a balance where General Mugisha Muntu's value system aligns with Honorable Chagulanyi's value system and aligns with Dr. Besige's value system, and the synergies that come out of that should be able to deliver, or at least we have expectation that they should be able to deliver a Uganda that we are looking for? Even beyond the opposition, should we not be looking for allies within the national resistance movement? Because it's foolhardy to imagine that we can have a conversation on transition or change without the NRM being involved in some way.
The numbers are critical. For example, in the electoral process, when you are being voted into power, the numbers are important because you have to get the majority votes. But see, it is not, the main thing we were talking about, where I'm talking about the numbers not being that critical, is where you have quality leaders who are the vanguard, who are the vehicle of transformation. Those you don't need numbers. But because if you have the numbers in form of, look, the best example I could use, a truck, a trailer, for example, or a bus. A bus can carry, maybe there are big buses which can carry up to 100 people, but you need one driver. So you need a very good driver in the bus and possibly a conductor. Those are two to maneuver the vehicle to take it to a particular destination. And there are passengers in that vehicle. There are many, yes. So in terms of leadership, you need the vanguard, you need the vehicle at the top. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Because once you have the party which focus on getting qualitative leaders who are value-driven, then you go in the second phase of doing the things which are necessary to attract the numbers, now the millions of people, to support this vehicle. So the two move together. But if you lose focus on the vanguard or on the vehicle, yes, you can get the numbers, the millions of people who can even vote you into power. And when you get into power, if you not have worked on those few I'm telling you about, they may be maybe 500, maybe 1,000, the pillars of that vehicle, the ones who will be in positions of responsibility, the ones who will be in the decision-making processes, to ensure that the values they are talking about, that they are able to walk the talk. Then, yes, you have the numbers who support you for whatever reason. You get into power and you don't transform the country. You continue moving in the same direction. And that's what has been happening in the last 62 years. I mean, we need to understand that. UPC in the 60s was a very popular party. It had the numbers in terms of support. When Amin took over power, the coup was a popular coup, at least in certain areas of Uganda. There were people who were even riding on tanks of the army when they took over. Kampala was jammed, packed by people who were against the UPC government. When UNF overthrew Amin, UNF was popular in the country. There were numbers. When we took power, other than in the north, of course, where there were challenges of counterinsurgency, in the southern belt, there were numbers of supporters. So the question is, if we've been having regimes which have had those numbers, why on earth have we continued moving in a negative direction? It means that we have not understood that even when you have numbers in terms of support, that the vanguard or the vehicle, which is in governance, in this case a party, must have taken specific focus and interest in building those few, a couple of hundred, of men and women who are resilient, who are focused on ensuring that this country moves in the right direction, in having established conditions in which there is justice, in which there is fairness, in which there is transparency, in this way there is equality before the law, equal opportunities. If you don't build those, I can tell you numbers mean nothing. They only mean that you get into power, but is power an end in itself? Power is a means, a certain end. So what is that end that we desire to have, we as the Ugandan people? I've seen even at times there was, I think, an effort in civil society combined with political actors and ordinary Ugandans who participated in creating a document, I think, which was called, I think, the Uganda We Want. So I can tell there's consensus on that. The majority of Ugandans want to see that kind of reality. I mean, that kind of desire, that those kinds of objectives translated into reality. But they are missing a point. That is not translated into reality unless it's focused on building that critical number of the leaders at the different levels who can act in tandem as teams to cause that translation to the path of transformation of the country. We miss that. And at times I'm not able to decipher why on earth we would be able to miss something that simple, yet so logical. Because leadership, first, the temptations of power by themselves are overwhelming. If you just go with people just in power, not everybody is going to be able to withstand those temptations, unless the vehicle in which he or she is operating is of a nature which is able to work day and night to build one team of people who are already formed, who already believe in these values, who will walk the talk, but also to help those who have it as an ideal and help them translate the ideas they have into a living reality within themselves. Because one, as is always said, nobody can give what they don't have. So for people who are going to transform this country, first they must be transformed themselves. If they are going to fight corruption, they must not be corrupt themselves. And they must have the capacity to withstand corrupt tendencies. Because I can tell you, any group, it doesn't matter which, whether it is any group from within NRM and the one which takes over, whether it is ANT, whether it is FDC, whether it is NUP, whether it is DP, any group which takes power is going to be tested to its limits. So any group which is not resilient, I can tell you in 2, 3, 4 years, if it's not resilient, if it does not have men and women who are really fully established in the values that they talk about, it will be overwhelmed. It's not rocket science. It's not guesswork. That happens all the time. So that's why now any of us, any of the groups in the opposition must work day and night to build resilience in ourselves. If we want to be different from the group which has caused the rot that is smearing all over the country, that rot is not going to evaporate by itself. That rot is not going to be made extinct by any group which goes there and also becomes part of the rot. And it's not a switch. Unfortunately, we are human beings. We're not like, power. You want, when there's darkness, you enter a room, you switch on power, and immediately it comes. Human beings are not like that. You have to do work, you have to pray, you have to organize, you have to do a number of things. You have to go, support each other. But also be ready in a disciplined way to know that the moment any group takes power, to have that resolution and determination in their minds that, the moment they get into power, relationships are not social relationships, biological relationships, political relationships are not going to be an influential factor in anybody keeping a blind eye to anybody who's lost direction. For that group to know that, what? The only way we can salvage this country is that we must move information. Anybody who breaks the line and falls, if it's not something serious, they can be picked up and stabilized again to move on. But if, for example, they become corrupt, that there is no other sympathy anybody would expect. A group like that must know amongst themselves that any of them who falls short of what the country expects would have to pay the necessary price. You can't build that on the day you take power. It must be built before you take power. Most people don't organize the dynamics of these things.
General, if I may just interject you right there, I just want to know if you are aware, number one, that perhaps that is one of the narratives in your message that alienates some people from you. I've had the benefit of debating ANT policy with some individuals, and one of the things we routinely ask ourselves is General Muntu a reincarnation of what is called, I think it is called, that kind of dictatorship that is benevolent, benevolent dictatorship. Do you want to replicate China, Singapore, and some people would ask Rwanda in Uganda? Because some people look at you that way. Your strict disciplinarian attitudes don't seem to fall within the fabric of ethics as we understand them in Uganda. Some people are saying you're too strict, you're too hard, you're so much of a disciplinarian, and some people think that you would replicate Chinese, Singaporean, or Rwandan dynamics. What do you say towards those kinds of comments?
I mean, many people forget very fast. I'm also a living Democrat. I think some people might seem to forget that. I have shown that, I have led a party, and I became the leader of FDC after 4 trials. I lost in 2009. In 2010, lost Dr. Chizabesji. I lost Dr. Chizabesji in 2015. I only won in 2012 when I became the party leader. When I lost Dr. Chizabesji in 2015, I was the party leader. When I lost to Honorable Boy in 2017, I was the party leader. And I know for sure, had I had the desire to manipulate that political process within FDC, there is no way Dr. Chizabesji would have won that flag. He won, I put the party behind him. Oboy won, and I congratulated him. And I went to Najanankuru and handed over peacefully. Even when we reached a point where we found that because of different strategies, we would no longer move together. We wrote a report, I called him, we met and we gave him a report and we said we are going to separate, but peacefully. We want you to build around defiance, which you believe in. We don't think we can coexist anymore. We have not all been mature enough from all sides to manage the two strategies within the same organization. And therefore we said, you build around defiance. We're going to build around the strategy which we built ANT around. If you're able to take power before us, perfect. That's what everybody wants. But don't have any struggle, any more struggles within the party. And then you got excuses from each side saying you are the ones dealing us, you are the ones dealing us. So let's separate peacefully, which we did. So if I was a person who believes in one-man show, I would have definitely manipulated that electoral process. Because I knew the levers, I knew I had the largest support in NEC, members of parliament who had the largest support. There's no way Dr. Chizabeji would have become the flag bearer of FDC when I was the party leader. There's no way Oboy would have become the president. So why do we take time to keep building ANT to become a team? Because we want people who are like-minded so that we keep moving and organizing around the values we believe in. You know, I am a human being, and I keep telling colleagues, I tell them, okay, we are building an organization because the tendency and it's the nature of human beings, they tend to look at one individual. And I keep telling them, no, we must do everything humanly possible to build teams at different levels, and all of us must be galvanized and build around objectives and common values. So that in the event any leader either retires or loses direction or dies, that the objective, the cause does not die. I keep asking people, if we are moving like from a rural area where we go to sub-counties and God calls me, would I say, no, I can't go because I'm still building NT? I would go. And then what would that mean? That NT collapses? No. We are building it so that it is resilient, so that it is self-propelling, that it is not built around an individual. And if the desire of our society is that now we want discipline, then the society is the one which demands that, and the vehicle implements it. But does not come from the mind of one human being, and as if that human being must carry the country on their shoulders. That people are relegating their responsibilities to hoping that someone can come and turn around this situation without them directly participating. That's why we encourage many to come into these vehicles of governance so they can influence the direction those vehicles of governance take. Is discipline good? Absolutely. Who wouldn't desire to live in a place like Singapore? If China didn't have the discipline they have, how on earth would China move from being a third world country to a superpower? It is about to become the largest economy on this planet. And it will evolve into a free society because that's the nature of human beings. You cannot cage them until the end of time. Internal dynamics will evolve. Right now, as we speak, China has got 400 million millionaires. The middle class is more than 1 billion. And eventually, the pressures will keep mounting until they determine what fits them in their own conditions as the Chinese people. So we, the African people, the elite, and everybody who is in Uganda, we must determine which direction we want to go to. How do we intend to go there? If we can get there without discipline, so be it. But if it requires discipline, then we must be disciplined. You know, you cannot eat your cake and have it at the same time. We need to know that.
Thank you, General. I just have to move on to the next question. I think your point on that question is succinctly made. I just want to ask on, just recently, I think about 6-7 days ago, your Bush War compatriot, Major General Kahinda Otafiire, rallied young people to rise up and challenge the government. What do you make of it? Do you suppose that General Otafiire is falling out with the regime, or is he trying to secure his legacy, if any? Does his contribution still matter, or is it a little too late? not just for Gen Otafiire, but other comrades who have come out to say enough is enough?
It's never too late, because you see the dynamics of change. Many times when a regime in power reaches a point where it no longer listens, where it keeps on piling up mistakes and covering them up, internally, naturally, inevitably, there will arise internal dynamics of people who are saying, no, enough is enough. And always when that situation arises, and my hope is that there will be many more, as General Kahinda Otafiire will be bold enough within NRM, who can take a stand and say, no. There are do's, there are don'ts. If we have made mistakes, let's carry out corrective actions. Personally, I would desire that there be many more like that. And therefore, those who are outside will be fighting on a different front. Those who are inside will be fighting within the regime. And two, all of us are fighting for a better country. I don't see any problem in that. And it's part of dynamics of change anyway. I mean, when you look at all countries, well, some of it successfully evolves. Sometimes it dies a natural stillbirth, and the internal dynamics of those who want to carry out reforms within a regime fall with the regime. But there are times when it succeeds, and those who are inside are able to turn around the situation inside, and they move from the wrong direction they would have been moving and move the country in the right direction. And therefore, they are able to, link with those who are outside, and then they can move the country together. I don't know how this one will evolve. I don't know. But it is worth the effort. It is worth the risk. Because anybody who is in NRM needs to know that if this country was to catch fire, all of us are vulnerable. They should not think that they will survive themselves. It's just short-sightedness for those who are there and comfortable, because I know many who don't believe in what is happening, but they keep quiet. I hear them saying that they fear to die. How can you fear to die? There are many more people who die in who die in hospitals because of natural death than those who even die in the process of politics. Or actually, those who die when a country implodes are many more. So they are just fearful because of their fear is self-imposed. Yes, there's danger, there's no doubt about that. But that's what life is all about.
You raise a good point on the apparent cowardice, perhaps, that exists among some people within the NRM inner circle, and those even outside the outer circle, but who think are in the inner circle. What's your message when you rally such Ugandans towards the cause, not just of the NT, but the cause of change? What do you discuss with them? Because I'm aware that you have candid discussions with some of them. For some, you're still on good terms, and your friends indeed. But what are the conversations you have with them, or is there a gag in terms of discussing the direction of the country? Have you given up on rallying some of those individuals into the fold of change?
First, I don't judge those who still lack courage, because fear is a human instinct. It's a natural human instinct. And when someone has fear, it doesn't mean that they are cowards, but that they have not interacted with forces that can help them transform themselves out of the state of fear into a state of courage. Why do I say so? Look at the soldiers, look at the army, the men and officers, the officers and men in uniform. All of them would have been civilians at some point. And basically, when they were still civilians, if you fire, weapons around an area where they are, most times, most of them will run. But you recruit them, you train them for 6 months, and that training transforms them. And they are trained to a state where they can advance towards fire. It's the same human being. So to me, when I see people who are still lack courage, I don't judge them. To the extent that we're able to interact with them and the situation also keeps on pressing them, my hope is that more and more will gain courage. And therefore, we keep building numbers of those who would have the courage and also be bold enough to act on the current conditions and change them into where we desire the country to move towards. So we keep engaging. And there are those who will get encouraged, There are those who won't get encouraged. But what I know for sure is that change is a constant. Change is always inevitable. But there are also times when the situation itself forces change. I mean, we look at some of the countries where the dynamics of change create more and more or a build-up of frustration, a build-up of anger, a build-up of restless, and at some point it is a point of eruption. There are times when that happens. The desired path ordinary would be if it is guided by many who are focused, organized, and who can direct or channel those energies into the correct direction. But when that does not happen, still change happens, eruption happens, still, you cannot stop it, you know? So we keep moving and hope that there will be guided change. If it doesn't happen, there will be eruption. Either way, change will happen. So those of us who know that, that's why we keep concentrating on building a vehicle so that in whichever way change happens, that we can participate in, if there is insanity that crops up out of an eruption, that we participate actively in bringing sanity in an insane situation. We're already in an insane one anyway, only that it has not erupted fully. Or if change happens in a smooth way, again, that we participate meaningfully, purposefully in ensuring that we advance the country to the correct direction. So our role, our focus as Alliance for National Transformation is to keep organizing ourselves, because we look at these things in depth and we interpret them in broad ways, you know, don't just look at the surface of things. And that's why we have to do everything humanly possible to keep organizing ourselves in spite of whatever challenges we meet, in spite of whatever anybody thinks, in spite of whatever anybody says. We are focused on this path, and nothing will move us from that path we have chosen to take. Come rain, come shine, whatever happens, we will keep on that path. And I know by God's grace, we will succeed.
Thank you, General Muntu. We will quickly move to matters that are beyond Uganda, but I just want to ask one other question, perhaps about our country. You come from the district of Ntungamo, and you do not seem to have enjoyed considerable support from the district in the 2021 elections. In fact, the records show that you came third behind the president and behind Honorable Kyagulanyi with about 7,110 votes.
The third was Honorable Boy. It was the fourth.
Yes. Why is there no support for you from your home district, and should that concern Ugandans in terms of your legitimacy and the legitimacy of your values and your party? But secondly, are there sort of things that are not known? You know, some people may have rumors of what you did and did not do in Ntungamo in the years past. What could be the underlying reason behind those support dynamics?
I'm not bothered by the low votes I got. Actually, even when I was the fourth, the votes were not that high, because it was, I think, 56,000 or something like that. It was below 60,000. So the vote wasn't high. However, I could also study the dynamics, and it is natural in people. You know, people are so frustrated with this regime, and their main focus was change. And it happened that on the side of the opposition, momentum was behind Honorable Bobi Wine. And there are many people who believed in us, but nevertheless who didn't, for example, vote for me, who voted for Honorable Bobi Wine, because they just wanted Gen Mugisha out of power. I fully understand that. And that wasn't the first time, because I know those who wanted change in 2001, in 2006, in 2011, in 2016, galvanized around Dr. Chiza Besigye. Even if there were many other candidates, there are many people who would not vote for the candidates maybe they believed in, but they wanted one candidate whom they believed had the chance of taking out Gen Mugisha. I understand that dynamic. But you see, our participation as Alliance for National Transformation, I knew for sure that I had no chance of winning the vote. But I also knew that we have a message which is unique and which is so critical and timely for the country. And we have to disseminate that message. And we keep doing that. And we know the dynamics of change create their own life. So there's always a build-up. I know for sure where we are at now as NT is completely different from where we were in 2021. There are many more people who appreciate our message now than in 2021, for example. And the more we build, the more that will keep increasing. And two is what they call the law of cumulative effect. Those who know the old measuring scales, they always have two sides. One side is where they put the weighing stone. The other side is where they put whatever you are selling, whether it's sugar, whether it is salt. And when you note the person who is working on the scales, measuring the salt, if they put a 10-kilo stone here, the first sugar that they put on the basin, even when they put the cupful, the second cupful, the third cupful, there is no movement. It remains stable. But you notice when it gets closer and they are getting to about 8-9 kilos, 9.5, it starts moving like this. And that's when they start putting in a slow way, in a slow manner, a few grains, and there's a shift in the balance. That's when it can take off a little bit more, and then there's a pure balance. But in our case, in terms of change, you don't have takeoff, you keep adding. And then you create that shift now. The weighing stone now would be lighter, and the material you are putting would be heavier. So what I'm trying to say in this regard, the law of cumulative effect. At the end, when a regime has done so many wrongs, at times you don't see any movement. Now, the shift in the balance of forces at times is triggered by a few things, just a few actions, and you see a complete shift. We know that that law is operating in our favor, that it is inevitable, that it is a natural process of change. But what is critical is when that shift happens, then is there an organized force now that can move the country from that point? Because a shift has happened in your favor, change has happened, the regime is thrown out, then what happens next? There is a saying in English that success comes when opportunity meets with preparation. I can tell you, when you're not prepared, opportunities will keep coming and they'll keep passing on. Opportunities will keep coming and they'll keep, passing on. So our focus, our single-minded focus is to keep preparing. So that at that point when opportunity comes, and it always does, and it will come, that we are prepared. That protect this country out of the vicious cycle in which it has been now for 62 years. It's something we cannot afford to divert our attention from. If there is anything this country needs to do, anybody who wants positive change, is to keep preparing so that we don't lose another opportunity, that a group gets into power and within a year or two goes in the same direction because of the entrenched nature of the rot that there is. No group which is not well organized, which is not disciplined, which is not focused, will survive that rot. It will be sucked in and it will start doing almost the same things all other groups have done. in all changes that have happened in the last 62 years.
Thank you.
I simply can't understand how we cannot understand that.
Thank you, General. I believe your message in terms of where we are going is loud and clear and has been for some time for those Ugandans who may follow you. I just quickly want to move to some questions regional. You've obviously been following the protests in Kenya and the effect they've had on the office of the president, the person of the president, and the political establishment in Kenya itself. Could this be a turning point for the region in light of the proposed protests by some citizens in Uganda on 23rd July? I think there's a proposal to have protests to Parliament on 23rd July 2024. Is Kenya a good example? Could it be a turning point? And how does that fit into your entire strategy if it is something that Ugandans are, taking on as something that could work?
Kenya has had a history of successful civil disobedience activities. They have that history. They also have many leaders who are inclined to that, who have had experience in that, and also the conditions ripen. At whatever point the conditions ripen, people act. Uganda has had a different history. We have not had many successful civil disobedience activities yet. We have had a few. They have had their own short-term impact. But we also have had a history where you look at the surface of things and you think everything is stable. And then there's an eruption. Because we have had the forms of violence which Kenya has never experienced in terms of warfare, in terms of fighting and blood spilling and all sides armed. And we have had that. We have had in the 60s, we have had in the 70s, we have had we had many fights in the 80s and 90s. However, that is not to say, because even Kenya, for that, and even Sudan has had a history of very active civil society engagement. There is a beginning point. And there's also the beginning or the starting of building a new culture. My hope is that in Uganda, that we could shift from the culture of erupting and going violent using weapons. Much as that is a legitimate method, it is also constitutional. But that if we can progress to the use of civil disobedience, if it is to be successful, however, it needs work. It needs hard work. It needs preparation. It needs training. It needs coordination. It needs resources. It needs resilience. It should not be a knee-jerk reaction. Two, it has one needs to know that even when it fails once, that does not mean that it does not work. That the people who are inclined to that would have to be resilient and would have to keep building without let up until a time when it creates impact.
Thank you, General. You raise a good point in terms of coordination and organization. In fact, some reports have come out to say that the Kenyan protests were heavily supported by the Agency of Technology, where young people managed to, use technology that mimics the functioning of walkie-talkies. There was also massive crowdfunding from the citizens. Do you think we have organization at that level? Is that part of the reason why, as ANT, you're building a strong, grassroots structure?
Our building of the grassroots structure is not in conflict with those, for example, who would want to participate in the civil disobedience activities. Because you see, these are pre-regime change. So people can engage in that. And our standing policy in Alliance for National Transformation has always been our main focus without any diversion of attention, is to build the organization as a vehicle for transformation. Individuals at the individual level, that individuals can go and participate in any other strategy. They can participate, for example, in civil actions. We as a party do not, because we know what it means to focus. Focus is very, very critical. For anything to succeed, there must be people who spend their time, energy, resources on a particular strategy. For us, we spend it on building a vehicle for transformation. Individuals can participate in other strategies like civil disobedience, because we know that even civil disobedience is not an end in itself, that it can lead to regime change. Now, if there is a regime change, then what happens? So the two are not in conflict, therefore. Individuals can participate in the activities that cause a regime. We, where we are involved, we know that our method is to build a party that is strong, focusing on how to manage power. We know that when it has that capacity, and that's why people also lose it. There are times they get confused about that. When you have a capacity to manage power, that capacity is also the capacity that you can use to oust a regime. Because ousting a regime requires high levels of organization. Removing a regime requires resilience, requires high levels of coordination, requires high levels of resource mobilization. And when we spend therefore time in what we do, there are people who say, oh, but how are you going to manage power unless you take it? When you are strong enough to manage it, when you have the capability to manage it, inherent within those capabilities is the very capability to actually take power.
Thank you, General Muntu. We are joined by about 94 people on our X space and a few others on our Zoom, the live Zoom recording. So our guests and listeners, we are very glad that you joined us. Please do have the conversation on social media as well. We are coming to the last bend of the conversation, and I will be taking some questions from the audience, both the Twitter, the X audience, and the Zoom audience. But before that, we know that there is election fever in the US. I think 7 days ago, Donald Trump had an attempted assassination on his life. The incumbent president, Joe Biden, is continuing, at least apparently, to decline in his health. How do those realities as they play out in the United States affect our political stand, and how can Ugandans take advantage of what may come out of that election, especially for the sake of entrenching the regime that you are fighting, and in terms of rallying those democratic forces towards the change agenda in Uganda?
So for American politics, where they are at now, are quite complex. There are so many unknowns. I know there are people who make their own judgments from what they are looking at, what they are studying. I'm not one of those who can make judgments on what I think is the likely outcome of the November election in America. I listen to many, political channels. I listen to different kind of commentators. I listen to different analysts. America is in a very complex situation. And America being a superpower, I believe everybody is focused on it, because what happens in America affects the rest of the world one way or another. There are so many unknowns. And we really hope that they'll come out well out of the situation which they are. Because if they nosedive, it will have its own impact. not only on themselves as Americans, but also on the rest of the world. So we'll keep watching with with keen interest. There's no way we cannot keep watching what happens in America, because it's America has been until very recent, literally like the only superpower. It's been calling the shots, even at a global level. But even outside America, the dynamics which are unfolding within the domestic politics of America itself are happening at the same time, when there are also dynamics unfolding on a global scale. Because clearly you can see that the rest of the world, that there are many actors who are trying to build a polar world, where there will be different actors and all of them respecting each other and creating maybe a new framework within which the direction of global politics, of global economics, global trade can be determined with the participation from all national actors. You can see that there is that struggle which is going on simultaneously as America is dealing with its own internal dynamics. It's going to be quite complex as it is, also quite interesting. Even for those who study how society evolves, how nation states evolve, how global dynamics keep shifting. I have a feeling that we are seeing history unfolding. I think we're like a generation in a sense. We are seeing history unfolding before our eyes. How we participate in that is going to be highly dependent on the nature of leadership that we have in our national, in the countries in Africa. I really hope that we'd have leaders who would measure up the kind of situation we're involved in. Unfortunately, many African leaders don't measure up the current situation because of its complexity. I hope we won't pay a price because of that short-sightedness at the level of the different actors on the African continent. Because in the unfolding dynamics, I think a lot is going to change. When you keep reading and listening to comments, having a situation that is completely outside of the normal expectations of what happens, ordinarily, is not beyond what we might see as things unfold in the next few years. Let's keep watching. But most important, at least, let's keep working on ourselves, because how we interact with the rest of the world is going to be dependent on our readiness, our discipline, our focus, and our sense of knowing that, we must take care of ourselves even as we interrelate with others. And if you have leaders whose only focus is how to survive as individuals in power, it's frightening. It makes us highly vulnerable.
Thank you, General Muntu, for that response. I will now be taking some questions from the audience, especially the people on the X space. Please feel free to request to speak if you have a question. As we come to the end of this segment, our technical team will be permitting people to speak, I believe. If I could see if there are people making requests to be speakers, I would be glad to allow a question, 2 or 3 questions before we end the segment.
Tumukunde kana mute. Tumuheki.
Sorry?
Mark can unmute and speak.
Okay, Mark Tumuheki can unmute and speak. Mark Tumuheki. Okay, do we have any other person, Sylvan, requesting speaking rights? Do you have any other person requesting speaking rights if you'd like to ask a question? I'm not sure if we have any questions. I will.
First of all, I thank the president for addressing us. But my concern would be, like I've always seen several of our leaders, they deal with us when they're seeking for support, but they just remain silent of when it missions. First, maybe mobilization always continue because like our president honestly has been so quiet.
All right. Please state your name and where you're speaking from, just for our records.
Yeah, I'm called Innocent Tumwine, currently in Fort Portal.
Okay. General Innocent Tumwine from Fort Portal has said you have been quite quiet on the political scene, and that it is important that mobilization goes on because he feels that sometimes after elections, people tend to run away. I don't know if you've been running away from your electorate in Fort Portal, but we will come to that.
We have not been able to organize in Fort Portal yet.
If we can take one more question and then we can answer all the questions at the same time.
Mark Elvis.
Mark Elvis, you can unmute and speak kindly. Mark Elvis, if you have a question, it would be a good time to ask it now. Okay, I'm not sure why we are not getting feedback from Mark Elvis. Sylvan, do we have any other questions?
Bruno.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Am I clear, right?
Yes, you're loud and clear. Please state your name and where you're talking from or speaking from for the record.
Thank you for the platform. I'm Bruno, talking in from Kasese. Thank you for the platform. Thank you, Gen Mugisha, for showing up at a critical time when most all of your people need you. I have one concern or two that I would like to bring to your attention. Gen Mugisha is that you have been quite a recommendable leader in most of all your aspects where you have held the responsibility. But sometimes you're going missing in action. For example, I can say now there is an alarming situation in Uganda, most probably in the parliament, whereby money is being eaten up every now and again, morning to evening. And sometimes I always wait for your comment, or either from your party or from you, for anything that you do talk about. That is quite very unfortunate. Sometimes you don't come up. I sometimes don't understand why could be our Gen is too silent. It's a bit very disgusting to some of us who believe in you. And I would implore you and most of all your members that please, politics is very dynamic and very different. Sometimes when you don't take up the mantle, when you don't come out of the hiding, when you don't come onto the platform, sometimes we won't notice that you're doing something, or sometimes we will miscalculate that maybe you're lying in the same bed with whoever we are choosing. So it's my request that please, whenever there is a serious accusation, whenever there is a serious problem, kindly take up the mantle, speak up, let Ugandans know that you are on their side or you are not on their side. But as I can say, we are gladly waiting for everyone who will show up to the rescue of Uganda. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Bruno, for that wonderful comment. General will respond to it in a bit. If there is just one more question, I can take one more question. If there isn't, we can proceed to answering these. Sylvain, just to confirm if there is any other question, any person requesting speaking rights.
The Beto Rollins.
Ka?
Hello.
Okay, please kindly state your name and where you're speaking from for the record.
Good evening, listeners. My name is Lawrence Kavito Katonji. I come from Shura district.
Go right ahead, Lawrence.
I would like to thank Gen Mugisha Muntu for coming out to speak on the current situation. For me, my concern is that globally we are hit by climate change, which is coming here in our country, and it's affecting some parts of the country very severely. And I would wish to understand from Alliance and from the General himself if they have interventions already, however small they could be, in regards to addressing climate change, especially for our people in Kasese, for people in Bundibugyo, for our people in Ududa. We need some serious interventions, not to wait to address disaster, but rather to intervene so that we can mitigate these challenges and have this for everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kabito. We have 3 questions for you, General. One is from Bruno on why you are not saying anything, or why there is no party position on the issues happening in the country. I suppose that relates to issues of corruption and other pressing issues, that have affected government budgeting, etc. That's from Bruno in, I think that is Bruno in Fort Portal. Then there was a question from Innocent on nature abhors a vacuum, and sometimes when you disappear, some other people take up that space. What do you have to say for those? I think you can answer those 2, and then I can come to the last one from Mr. Kabito on climate change.
Actually, the party gives statements at different times on issues of controversy. Also, in reaction to the wrongs that the regime commits. The only problem, though, is maybe the extent of dissemination. Of course, it's one positive thing in the country is that there are so many media channels, radios, TVs. It's positive, but also has its negative aspect, because you can give, for example, an interview to one TV station, and there's no TV station which has got people who watch that has more than, I think the highest has about 11 or 15%, less than 15% certainly. So for people to hear the same message, you would have had to go to about 10 TV stations. For radios, there are more than 200 radios. And radios, you find that when you go, for example, to regions, we speak on radios. When we are speaking, for example, on radios in Busoga, the person for Portrait won't know. They won't hear. Social media, we keep on building our presence on social media.
Spaces.
So communicating, we are communicating. Only maybe that the messages are not yet widespread to hit about 80% of listenership on radio as well as TV and as well as on social media. We're going to keep working on that. Not being seen, physically or to be participating in what the colleague from Fort Portal and the one of Kasese is talking about doesn't mean that we aren't doing anything. We are working day and night. Actually, the only impediment is resources. Whenever we go to resources, we go to the districts. In Toro sub-region, we have only done 3 districts so far. We have done Chegegwa, we have done Bunyangabu, we have done the district that borders with the Uganda. Kamwenge, 3. We are going to go back to complete the remaining districts. We have not been to Kasese yet. We intend to go to Kasese as well and do about, I think they have about 42 sub-counties and be able to do that. We've been to about 30 plus districts so far. And when we get resources, our desire would be up to by the end of next year to have done either all.
General, if I may cut you short, I think your Twitter audience is missing your communication. The Zoom audience is getting it, but I think your Twitter audience is missing your communication. If you could unmute your mic, please.
We have been to only 3 districts in Toro sub-region: Kamwenge, Chegegwa, and Bunyangabu. When we get resources, we intend to go and complete the remaining districts. We have not been to Kasese yet. We've so far gone to about 30 plus districts in the whole country. Our desire, and hopefully we'll be able to get the resources, is to complete all the districts, best case scenario, by mid next year. Or at least we have done 100 districts by mid next year. It will remain a continuous exercise until we establish our presence in the village, parish, sub-county. That is within our short-term, medium, long-term objectives. There's no way we're going to divert attention from that. However, we could give statements and it is positive, it is encouraging, people will hear. But while we do that to the extent that we're able to, what is most critical is that we keep building on the ground, keep attracting men and women who are like-minded in terms of wanting to promote value-driven leadership or value-driven organization in this country. That's our main focus. And we are doing it without let-up. So don't worry, because there are people whom when they don't see us, they think we are doing nothing. No, we are working. A while back, I quoted a saying which I read on the walls of one hotel in Fort Portal. Actually, the colleague in Fort Portal might know that hotel. It's called Le Jour, I think, Le Jour. It belongs to nuns. Now, that saying it goes that work hard in silence and let victory or success make the noise. So the many people who think that we aren't doing anything, I am sure of only one thing. Whether we speak out and people hear or not, and we keep working the way we do, quietly or openly whenever we get the opportunity and we can be captured by the press. One thing I'm sure of, our success, our victory is going to make so much noise. Even Uganda in the remotest village will hear. I can guarantee you that. We don't sleep. We keep working 24/7. Yes, there are impediments, but by God's grace, even those impediments will be overcome. And we will achieve what we desire to see in this country. So don't lose hope.
Thank you, General.
We're also going to try and see how we can replicate maybe some of the platforms that can be accessed by the public. But those who are in the ANT, there are different platforms. At least those know and see wherever we go. The last question on the environment. Yes, it's a concern. Yes, we are growing in numbers. The last census, I think, shows that we're about 46 million people now. We are growing very fast. In another 20, 30 years, we will have come about 100 million. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on land. The unfortunate thing, because of corruption and lack of discipline and focus by this regime, people's living conditions are low. The capacity to graduate to other means of utilization of energy for heating their homes, for cooking, for lighting, is not advanced. 60+% of the population is still using firewood or charcoal, and is one of the biggest problems that we are going to face as a country. We have always hoped that the sitting regime would maybe care more than they do, to focus in two ways. One, to see how they can invest resources in those who are working on alternative sources of energy, like those who are in eco stoves, those who are manufacturing stoves which are energy saving, those who are creating other ways of how to generate energy for cooking, like those who are using volcanic rocks and all that. Because when you do that, encourage them to expand their capacities, but also work on the side of those who are in the rural areas, because those stoves, most of them are still expensive. The initial cost is high. Most of the peasants won't manage that. But with a government program, they can work out ways of how they can enable them to buy those kinds of stoves. And then there is a repayment period over a long period of time. Because now, even those who use charcoal in towns, a sack of charcoal is about 80,000. If one uses a sack per month, that means by 12 months, they have used more than 800,000 in charcoal, maybe 960,000. And yet a stove like that costs about 500,000, 600,000. And if they are able to buy that kind of stove, it would cut down the costs that they spend on charcoal, 960,000, to about 150,000, 200,000. So they cannot buy it now. So there has to be some program of intervention, because it would also save the forests. If you have 60+% of the population depending on charcoal, why on earth would people not know that they are going to keep cutting down trees? That's one side. The other side is like those who are in swamps. Government has to work out programs on how they can translate people from swamps or transition them from swamps to doing other activities which are not harmful to the swamps. If I was talking to an environmentalist today, and he told me that fish farming is not harmful to the environment. They'd have to look at those kinds of activities. So when they are banning an activity which is harmful to the marshes or to the wetlands, that they transition them to something that will sustain them. You cannot just say, move out. If someone, for example, is growing rice, how will they survive unless you transition them? So any serious government would have to work out a robust program to do that. At least that's what we are planning to do as Alliance for National Transformation. The moment people trust, Ugandan citizens trust us with power. Because if we don't intervene, for example, in wetlands, Lake Victoria is a shallow lake. My hope is that Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, which are actually at the best, would have to work day and night to ensure that Lake Victoria doesn't, at some point, disappear. A lake which is that shallow can end up like Lake Chad or Lake Pika, which almost completely disappeared. So the intervention measures are urgent. They are needed like yesterday. Once swamps are eliminated, the filtration process, the lake is going to silt in areas where there is industry. The effluent, which is not trapped in the industries, and then it is processed so that only fresh water is able to go into the swamps, and hopefully swamps will still be in existence, and then they can filter the water. It can go into the lake to support the fish industry, also to support transportation to provision of water. If a lake like Lake Victoria is impacted upon, it also impacts on the weather patterns. It is so clear, but there have to be people who are focused in government who will be able to have to do that. We hope that this regime will be able to do it in the few months that is still left with. If they don't do that, then one hopes that the Ugandan citizens will trust us as NP. We have that program. We definitely are disciplined, focused people, and we would carry out meaningful interventions, even in the area like of environment, for the short term, medium, and long term, so that we can have a country preserved, beautiful as God created it to be, and also benefit from one of the low-hanging fruits, which is tourism. Because if we impact it negatively because of the environment, then those areas also get affected. Yet they are generators of national wealth. There's a lot of interconnection in regard to that.
Thank you, General Muntu. What I hear you say is that ultimately it all rises and falls on leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. I'll ask you just one last question, and after which we will close. Rwanda recently went to the polls. Your former Bush war compatriot, General Kagame, won resoundingly, or at least is reported to have won resoundingly with over 99%. Do you think that in Rwanda we are creating a new problem in terms of electoral democracy, or is it indeed the will of the people that General Kagame should stay in charge? And considering what's been happening in his last term of office with Uganda, with DRC, with Kenya, what is the future for this discussion?
We have totally different dynamics. The dynamics in Uganda are totally different from the dynamics in Rwanda. Rwanda has got its own approaches in how to manage power and how to develop their country. We have had our own challenges here in Uganda. We are still grappling with our own challenges. And we really hope and wish Rwanda the best in resolving the challenges that we are faced with. And for us, we'll keep focused on how we can resolve our own internal problems. Because one thing I know for sure, there is no country which will meaningfully intervene in another country to solve their problems. The citizens of every country are the ones who have the capability to solve their own problems. You know, and being in a region that is interconnected, and I am someone who so deeply believes in the integration of East Africa, the 8 countries. I'm always very careful in the way when I hear comparisons between the 7 countries, for example, Sudan, Congo, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, different challenges, but as a political actor, I concentrate on ensuring that we resolve our own internal problems. I don't publicly comment on whatever other countries are doing. I believe the citizens of each country will shape the future of their countries, and then hopefully we can all work closely together and agree on common values, on the common path that we need to take as a region. But after every group of citizens in their own country would have stabilized themselves, ensure that there is zero tolerance to corruption, ensure that they build a foundation on good governance principles, and then we coordinate effort. And then we can advance as a region.
Thank you very much, General Muntu. From our discussion today, I take a few talking points. It is clear that you are focused on, as a party and as an individual, on creating a situation where when the shift of balance in power happens, which you inevitably believe it will happen, if it should happen, it should find a prepared people. You also talk very strongly about taking a cautious approach in terms of how we intervene or interact with other nations, especially considering that we have our own internal dynamics. We've been joined this evening with over 100 people in our X space, and I think about 10 or 15 on our Zoom call. It's been a real pleasure to have this conversation with you, General Muntu, as always, and it is our hope that the things that you've discussed will not only benefit those who support you and the Alliance for National Transformation, but for the entire country. From us to you, ladies and gentlemen, in case you would like to join the Alliance for National Transformation, the number to call is 0778 128 964. I repeat, 0778 128 964. You can have conversations with the people from the Secretariat. But from me to you, the entire audience, thank you for the pleasure of your company, and I wish you good deliberations, even as we build together. And as General usually says, we are not fighting for ourselves, we are fighting for the soul of our nation. Thank you very much. Good evening, and God bless you.
Thank you, Kansiime, for hosting me again. Thank you for the listeners for participating. God richly bless you. Off.